wage workers, fast food workers are organizing and demanding a decent living wage, an end to poverty wages, a $15 an hour minimum wage. All of a sudden, everywhere we hear an outpour of concern from the political establishment for the funding for nonprofits, for the ability for social services to function, and a concern about the viability of small business. That is the answer we keep hearing when we are organizing for $15 an hour minimum wage. It's interesting they weren't saying that a year ago. Was small business struggling a year ago? Were our human services funded a year ago? But now they're concerned. But we agree. We agree that small businesses need support. We agree we need full funding for our education and social services. Isn't that right? But where were they when Boeing was extorting our state, was demanding a ransom, the largest corporate tax giveaway for a single corporation in U.S. history? Boeing, one of the wealthiest corporations in the world, they demanded $8.7 billion in tax handouts from the state government. And what did that same political establishment do? They forked it over. Republicans, Democrats, and our governor, Democrat Jay Inslee, they handed them the biggest tax handout in U.S. history. And where does that money come from? That comes directly from funding for our schools. It comes directly for funding for DESC and human services and nonprofits. And that money could be used to support small business. It comes from raising the tax burden on small business. Boeing doesn't pay anything. The small businesses here in Seattle do. Here in Seattle, there's also, let's leave aside the question of Boeing and the state government. What could the city government do here in Seattle? If they weren't beholden to a few big developers, one of whom I think people know, Paul Allen, if they weren't beholden to Starbucks and the super rich, what could they do? They could inject resources into desperately needed human services by taxing. They do have the authority on a local level if they were creative and they had the political will to tax big corporations here in Seattle. We, Socialist Alternative, have raised, and Shama Sawant have raised, that they could levy what's called an excise tax, a fee, on big box retailers, which do exist in Seattle. They're called Target, they're called Sam's Club. On companies that have franchises in Seattle, fast food chains, Starbucks, and on financial institutions that have businesses here in Seattle, as well as levying much higher developer impact fees on big developers. That money could be used to give support to nonprofits and small business. But is that being done? We have seen no interest, zero, from the city government in any of those proposals, with the lone exception of Shama Sawant, who coincidentally is not taking any money from those corporations. To get that done, we cannot leave the political plane. The government, locally, statewide, and even nationally, we cannot leave it to the monopoly of the Boeings, the monopoly of the Starbucks, of the big developers, the super rich. We need our own political representation, and we can see the impact that can have when we have one here in Seattle. What if we had two? What if we had five? What if we had our own party running candidates up and down this country? Candidates who are independent working class candidates, who are not trying to serve two masters, but were completely beholden to our interests, who did not take a penny from big business, who only took an average worker's wage and took an oath to fight for our interests, not for the big corporations. But we will have our chance in 2015 here in Seattle. But most immediately, we need to concentrate on building this movement, a massive movement. Are you going to get active in this movement? Are you going to join us in building this movement? I really agree with the last speaker, Paul Bigman from the King County Labor Council, what he said. We need to prepare for a ballot initiative if we want to avoid one. Will you come and will you register today for the April 26th 15 Now conference to make those preparations?